Hello, everybody, and welcome in to another episode of the Couch GMs Podcast. It is Monday night, September 9th, 2024. I'm your host, George Kurt, joined by the one and only Cody Roadcap. Cody, week one done, and we're live out there to the public. How you feeling?
I'm feeling better. It was a rough start to week one. As you know, me and George, Eagles-Packers fan, had to watch the game in Brazil together. And it ended not great for the Packers. Not only did they take the L, but then Jordan Love got hurt. So it was a long weekend waiting for his status update recovery. But overall, seems to be on the up and up. I'm sure we'll talk about that. But yeah, week one, a lot of great games, especially to end that 1 o'clock slate. Love being able to watch all the games. And hopefully my fantasy teams come through on Monday night as well.
Lot to hit. I mean, week one always has a lot to hit, but we're going to talk about some of the things that we saw in week one, hit some waiver wire targets for your fantasy teams, and preview Monday Night Football as we get out of here before the game starts tonight. Make sure you're following us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok at the Couch GMs, especially if you're listening to this on a podcast platform, as you can listen to us live and ask questions live 6:30 Monday and Thursday nights. Or you can always hit us in our DMs with fantasy questions. We'll answer them to you on the show or in your DMs if it's something to help you with your upcoming week. Cody, why don't we just sit back, relax, and chat?
Yeah, real quick before we jump into that, one quick thing to add on to your spiel, which you did a great job with. If you don't catch us live, this will still be in your podcast feeds Tuesday morning and Friday morning. So reminder out there as well. But let's sit back, relax, and chat.
Took about a minute and 40 seconds for Cody to just jump in and be like, hey, George isn't doing well enough. I'm just going to have to fill in the gaps for him.
Story of my life. Carrying George with me.
So as I said, as we go through our little talk here, feel free to drop any questions you have in the chat. We'll answer them as we get them in. But in the meantime, let's talk about the least talked about quarterback contract that we may have ever heard. And that's Dak Prescott getting signed about an hour and a half before the 1 o'clock game started. Everyone's just getting ready for football. And then the Cowboys are like, oh yeah, by the way, Dak's got a contract finally.
Yeah, I mean, it was a surprise. I mean, highest paid quarterback, I believe it's $60 million annual per year. So he's first to cross that threshold. Shout out to him. I mean, they had to, get him done. And, they came out and played well. Not that contract is behind him. Another team, their star player, they're waiting on a contract, didn't play great. I think there's some correlation there. And I also think week one showed us that there's a lot of bad quarterback plays. So when you have a good one, you got to lock him up.
And he did play well in week one, too. I mean, I'm surprised personally that the Browns were favored in that game. And I didn't even talk much about spreads last week because we were talking about the entire season preview. But Browns defense is pretty solid, and the Cowboys still went out there and put up a 30 burger on them. Was that big enough to say burger? I don't think so. I think that's where it starts with 40.
Yeah, you got to start with 40 for the burgers, unless it's a $5 value meal. But then, so maybe that was a $5 value meal performance by the defense giving up there. That's a terrible pun. I'm so sorry. But yeah, Cowboys look good. I talked a lot on them on our show last week when we did our preview. I didn't have them making the playoffs. And again, it's week one. We're going to overreact a lot here, but the goal is to not overreact and kind of let this play out for the first 4 games and kind of start to get a real sense for where these teams are. But I was impressed by what I saw out of Dallas with their new defensive coordinator and Mike Zimmer. Dak looked good. They got Brandon Cooks involved. CD didn't look like he missed a step. And honestly, like when Zeke hurdled that guy in the first run of the game, I was like, what is this, 2016? But no, I mean, even Zeke looked good. And so Cowboys might be better than I expected.
Yeah, I think they really did raise some morale over the last few weeks by finally getting CD back in house with his contract. And then they did right by Dak Prescott by getting him signed before the season started. It would have been rough seeing a quarterback with the success he's had, despite the lack of playoff success, going into the final year of his contract at this point without a deal. I don't think there's any way that he would have went back to Dallas if they would have not signed him before this season started. So they did good by him on that. But I think people were starting to sleep on him, and they were also starting to think, like, build the hype behind Washington. I even heard some people saying Washington was going to finish ahead of them in the standings after this season. And I think week one kind of flipped everyone back to Dallas is still a contender. Washington's still a young growing team.
Yeah, and there's nothing to say that can't change. Maybe the contract was that extra boost that we needed. And again, that's why we're not going to overreact too much on week one's performances, but there's still some stuff to talk about. Speaking of the Cowboys, though, Jake Ferguson did get injured in that Browns game. He was one of those late end tight end flyers that, didn't have that super high upside, but a consistent red zone target for Dak. And he is week to week with an MCL. You drafted him at the point where you're going to stream pretty much anyways, but still makes the pot of available tight ends less, or the bucket, I should say, on the Couch GMs podcast going into week 2.
There's been dartboards. There's been buckets. I don't even know what we're at anymore. We'll have to come up with another one for this season because I feel like every year it's changed. But again, someone else that's in that bucket of tight ends, David Njoku, got hurt as well. He's week to week with an ankle injury. He had a fairly good start. He looked like he was on his way to about a 8 to 10 point performance, is what you're expecting out of a guy you take as like tight end 9 or 10. And he's also now probably going to miss time. I think we're going to be spending a lot of time. I mean, a little bit of time this week that, later this show, we talk about waivers about what to do at tight end. But on Thursday, I think there's going to be a lot of questions that come in during the week of like, where do I go at tight end, from some of the guys that underperformed this week to the guys that got hurt.
Definitely. And with David Njoku and specifically, like, that Browns offense looks so bad. Like, you probably didn't want to play him anyways because Deshaun Watson couldn't get it together again. Like, definitely, again, not trying to overreact, but definitely have concerns about the Browns going forward as long as Deshaun Watson is playing quarterback for them.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think that a lot of that has to do with Deshaun Watson? Like, we saw them play pretty well last year, but when we consider them playing well, we also consider it with Joe Flacco. Not even Joe Flacco is not even, super special at this point in his career.
Hey, and the guy down in Tampa Bay, Baker Mayfield, he's starting to look good. He got him to the playoffs for the first time in a long time, was beat up and played through a ton of injuries, and they moved on for Deshaun Watson. And now Baker's playing great, and Deshaun not so much.
They really, I think, made a mistake. So I've thought of this more and more over the last few years, how you can look at a guy like Baker Mayfield. You can look at a guy like Gardner Minshew. And are they a top 32 quarterback in the league? Potentially. I mean, Baker Mayfield definitely. Gardner Minshew may be a little bit more of a question. So, like, that tells you they're worth
top
starting.
32?
Yeah.
Oh, dude, they're like top 20. Like,
so that tells you they're worth
bottom
starting for a team in the NFL. But teams are going to go out there and they always want to try to find the top 10 quarterback, the top 5 quarterback, which is why the Browns took the swing at Deshaun Watson. But sometimes, especially when you're a team like the Browns, who had such that dominant defense, and it was a young defense that now we saw got even better since Baker Mayfield left, you kind of have to take your shot at winning a Super Bowl a little bit of the unconventional way, I think. And they totally made that mistake when they got rid of Baker.
Yeah, we'll see if Deshaun Watson can turn it around. But the two biggest injuries of the weekend, not just in terms of fantasy football, but in terms of the team outlook. We talked about quarterbacks, so we'll start with Jordan Love. First game, Green Bay Packers had a lot of hype going into that game. He avoided a major injury. He is out 3 to 6 weeks with an MCL sprain. So they're thinking the earliest is potentially week 4 against the Vikings. At least that's what Adam Schefter put out on Pat McAfee today. But Matt LaFleur said if Jordan Love is not cleared, then Malik Willis will start this week. So that big word "if" has some people thinking, does he try to push it back early? The Green Bay Packers are super conservative. I don't expect him to play this week at all. But the fact of the matter that it's already an if has me going, okay, that week 4 game seems pretty realistic, and it's not the whole 6-week timeline.
And after seeing it happen, I thought week 4 would be a stretch. I was trying to go to see what their schedule is here. Indianapolis this week. They look like a tough team this week, so that would be a tough game. Tennessee held in there with the Bears. We don't really know what either of those teams are right now at this point. And then, like you said, Minnesota's divisional game. So it's not even like you can go out there and be like, Malik Willis gives us a chance against the New York Giants or the Carolina Panthers. Like, Indy's going to be a tough matchup, but you also have to think in the long-term scope of the season. I think putting him out there this week, even if there's a chance that like, oh, he's going to be fine, he's just going to be sore, is probably not a good move. Even if there's not really a chance for re-injury, which I would think with a knee injury there would be. I just don't think it's good for their season as a whole, because this is still a team that's hoping to contend for a Super Bowl, and they need Jordan Love in January if that's going to be the case.
For sure. And like I said, I don't expect him to be out there. I think that week 4 divisional matchup against the Vikings home game seems like the right fit. They get 2 AFC opponents, so not the worst for standings, even if they end up going 0-3. But Jordan Love's hurt. And we talked a lot about Malik Willis. So, and all draft season, we talked about which Packers receiver is it going to be. On Thursday night, it was Jaden Reed.
Yeah.
But is there any Packers wide receiver you're playing in week 2 with Malik Willis at quarterback?
No.
Okay.
I was really looking forward to being able to go out there and add Jaden Reed to my lineup this week. Because there was, I think everywhere I had him, he was my wide receiver 4. Or I had another running back over him in a 2 flex, and he ended up on my bench. And I was really looking forward to it. But I'm hoping that wasn't just the 1 week fluke, which honestly it might have been. This might be one of those situations where next week it's Christian Watson, and the week after it's Romeo Doubs, and then Bo Melton gets a week. But I think it was comforting if you're someone who put your stock in Jaden Reed to see that week 1 he went out there and did very well.
Yeah, definitely exciting, and definitely hope Love is going to be back. But speaking of wide receivers, the Rams, Puka Nacua, re-aggravated his summer knee injury, and he is going to be placed on IR. Tough blow for the Rams. The good news is Cooper Kupp picked up right where he left off 2 seasons ago. Came out, had a career high in receptions. So 1, the impact on Cooper Kupp moving forward. Thoughts on that? And then 2, anything about Puka Nacua you want to add?
I mean, losing Puka for at least 4 weeks, more than likely, is going to be a really big hit to your fantasy team because he was a borderline first-round pick for some people. A lot of people took him in the second round. So I'm sure we'll talk about another receiver or two who's picked in that range that was disappointing this week. But that's a big hit to Puka Nacua owners, especially because of Cooper Kupp breaking out and looking like he was playing in 2019 again. Because Matt Stafford, his safety blanket was always Cooper Kupp. And last year, Puka Nacua kind of took over that spot because Kupp never really got up to 100% after his hamstring injury. And you could just tell something wasn't quite right there. But as soon as his number 1 weapon was back, and the guy that he's been working with for now, I think 3 or 4 years in LA, it was immediately like, I need a big third down, Cooper Kupp. Oh, this guy's rushing off the side, unblocked, off the blind side. My hot route goes to Cooper Kupp. Like it's that offense runs through him. So now when Puka Nacua comes back, I think you're going to be wishing that the draft rankings were flipped. Cooper Kupp was taken in that 1-2 stretch, and Puka Nacua is still going to have a lot of success as long as he's healthy, but I don't think he's going to be giving you second round production. He'll be giving you more like 4th, 5th round pick production around where Cooper Kupp was being taken. So I hope it's enough to get some of these owners some wins and push them into the fantasy playoffs, but it's going to be a little bit more of a rough road than we thought.
Yeah, and I think because he re-aggravated, he's out for at least 4 weeks. It could be even a couple more weeks till he is back up and ready to roll. So hopefully you grabbed another wide receiver or you're active on the waiver wires, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But it's week 1. We got to talk about some of these big games. I mean, we had an overnight. It went into overnight, but the overtime game, the whole conversation, should both teams get the ball, even in the regular season, came back up. We had some games come down to the wire. We had a couple comebacks of double-digit points. The Bears, the Bills, and the Dolphins, I believe, all came back from at least 14 down. So that was an impressive week. But what were your biggest surprises or your favorite game or just overall how you feeling after week 1?
I think I'll start with my favorite game was probably that Cardinals-Bills game. And I think it was because it was nice to see Kyler Murray also be somebody who turned back the clock to 2 years ago. They got out to a bit of a lead against Buffalo, and you had a little bit of that sinking feeling of like, they got rid of Stephon Diggs. We knew they were already kind of in a rocky situation. The Cardinals weren't great last year. Is this the Bills being bad? But then Josh Allen, as Josh Allen does, brings them back from the dead, essentially, to take a lead. You had Kyler Murray have his chance at that game-winning drive. It was just that game kind of had a little bit of everything for a week 1 game when normally play is a little bit more sloppy. And it was, a pretty high-scoring game, too, 34-28. So I think that was my favorite game of the weekend.
Dude, I'm right there with you on that one. Loved the 4 box, so I got to pick my teams on NFL Sunday Ticket. # not a sponsor, but that'd be great if you wanted to be. But yeah, I had them on. Of course, I had to watch the Bears game because I had to see what Caleb did. But I couldn't stop watching the Cardinals and the Bills, and definitely regretted not letting you steal the thunder last week when you were like, if the Bills make the playoffs, Josh Allen wins MVP. And I was just like, man, I wanted to say that so bad, but George beat me to it. And then we saw that game in week 1. And I almost texted in the group is like, yep, George, think you got that one right. If the Bills team can make the playoffs, Josh Allen, it will be the MVP. And I think that's a pretty confident thing. I know, don't overreact week 1, but he put that team on his back. He spread the ball around just enough, got those 2 rushing touchdowns. That game was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I don't even think it's overreacting for week 1 because we've seen Josh Allen do it before. It's not like this is an isolated incident, but I'm just the amazement of how many people are on their stat sheet receiving the ball. They had the most productive wide receiver they had was Keon Coleman, which is also good to see as he seemed to be kind of the front runner of the fantasy players. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. You got 9 players with receptions in Buffalo this week. That is absolutely crazy.
Definitely. And you know what? We got before we talk too much about this, we got a fan question. Let's just jump right into it. So would you trade Worthy for London? So that's Xavier Worthy of the Kansas City Chiefs for Drake London. So Worthy had the game on Thursday night. London, a little bit disappointing, but do you think long-term upside, how would you do it?
I still am a fan of London because I got to think that something is going to be changing there with bringing Kirk Cousins. It's hard to play in week 1, let alone week 1 on a brand new team and a brand new offense. So that one's tough. Personally, I'm going to try to hold it for one more week. I think Worthy has a lot of upside in that offense. He reminded me way too much of Tyreek Hill to want to think that it was a one-off for Xavier Worthy. That might just be my nostalgia glasses again speaking when I saw somebody running that fast in a Chiefs uniform, but I'm actually going to hold Worthy, believe it or not.
Interesting. Yeah, I know that one's tough. I think I would do it. I would trade London. Or for London, we draft him higher. Rashee Rice is still there. He was still the guy that got the most targets. Travis Kelce is still there. He's going to get targets. They still spread the ball around. Isaiah Pacheco. And I think Worthy is going to be that splash play guy, but you're going to be hoping for that big play touchdown. I don't know if he'll be the consistent, X amount of targets each week. Some weeks it'll look like, hey, I wish I would have had Xavier Worthy. But I think for a safer, long-term, more consistent player, I would make that trade for Drake London.
I will, just to back you up, Cody. He did only have 2 catches for 47 yards with that touchdown, carried the ball once. So when you look at it, touching the ball 3 times, the two touchdowns really does inflate that stat line. I obviously think that there's going to be an even more expanded workload as the year goes on for Worthy. But yeah, when it comes to consistency, thinking about it, London probably is going to eventually be your better guy.
And, some people might say the Falcons were one of the bigger disappointments of the week. They had a lot of high expectations, a lot of high hopes. But, Kirk Cousins was coming off the Achilles injury, the new team gelling, obviously can't make excuses for their performance. I mean, they lost without giving up to a game. They didn't allow a touchdown. They allowed 5 field goals and they lost the game. So they got to fix that. But I do think that team is only going to get better as the season progresses. And I think Drake London will pay off for that.
And also the Steelers defense. That is a very tough one. That's true. It's also funny. They're not the only team that lost without giving up an offensive touchdown. I think Tyler's not here.
Yeah, he was my favorite part of the weekend. Inside the Couch GMs, they had us. We have a chat that we talk all the time. And during the game, Will Levis ran a read option, picked up like 11 yards. And they were starting to drive, and he was like, I'm getting a Will Levis jersey. And then I think that was like the curse. Like, he should never have said that because after that, you saw a couple interceptions, the fumble, and he texted back, I'm not getting a Will Levis jersey. So definitely rode the upside of that game. But yeah, some wild things. And that's what happens in week 1. These teams have some fluke moments. I mean, I still don't know what Will Levis was doing on that last play, where he just flicked it out like, you got to know the situation, just take the sack there. that ended up being the pick six to do it. I don't know if it's accurate or not, but I've seen on Twitter that their coach was like, maybe if we just punted on 1st and 10 every game, we would have won the game. And that was by A to Z Sports. So I've at least looked at their stuff before. So that seems pretty reputable, which is a crazy comment for a coach to make. But that was definitely a tough one for all you Titans fans out there.
I hate to just jump in. I know we're going to talk about this more later, but anybody out there that's listening that is an owner of Christian McCaffrey, he is officially inactive for Monday Night Football. Surprise. So if you haven't already, go out there, grab Jordan Mason, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get deeper in the show and move to our Monday Night preview. But wanted to throw that out there, give people as much time as they can have to switch out Christian McCaffrey.
No, definitely. And that's a big reason why we went into this live format, was to, be able to give people live updates as we hit these, inactives lists. And that Christian McCaffrey, that one is big news. Jordan Mason should be the guy that starts there, but they still have rookie Isaac Guerendo. They have former Green Bay Packer and former New England Patriot Patrick Taylor there. I'm interested to see, Jordan, if you want to look it up on who the actual inactives are, which running backs, because they had 4. Are they all up? Did another one make the inactives list? And then another guy that might be interesting too would be Braylon Allen, the backup running back from Wisconsin, the rookie. Had a really nice preseason behind Breece Hall. Maybe he gets some opportunity as well. So definitely an interesting situation to monitor there in San Francisco.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I haven't found the actual full inactives and actives list, but if Cody wants to fill a couple more seconds, I can take a look.
For sure. I mean, definitely. I'll just let everyone know that, yes, Brandon, we're talking about it right now. McCaffrey is out. Did not expect that coming. And I have a matchup riding on that. I think, did you as well have a fantasy matchup?
I actually have 2. One of them I'm hopefully will still be okay. It's a point per first down league. I'm only down by 3 points, 3.5 points. So putting in Jordan Mason there hopefully helps me out. But my Couch GMs World Cup matchup actually was a Christian McCaffrey versus Breece Hall, me down by 5 points. That would have been a good matchup, and now a little bit of an uphill climb for me there.
Definitely. And I'm going to have, because I did not get Jordan Mason, as I'm going to either have to go with one of those guys I just mentioned, like an Isaac Guerendo, maybe is the guy I might be leaning towards. Or Braylon Allen, who I do currently have, as I picked him up to stash just in case something happened to Breece Hall, which I'd never wish injuries for. But I do play the waiver wire system a little bit like that, look ahead to some potential guy targets and make some substitutions with the back end of the roster as we head into the Monday night game. Any update on all the inactives for Monday night?
Nothing official yet. So I believe that's got to come out sometime in the next 15 minutes or so. So we'll have to hit again after we go through the rest of our show.
Perfect. So, let's just jump right in. One more other injury piece of news. Lamar Jackson didn't practice on Monday. They did have the Thursday game, so they get an extra day of practice on Monday. The official injury report doesn't come out until Wednesday, but that is something to keep an eye on. We haven't heard anything about him getting banged up at the end of that game or anything, but he did take, a couple big hits, and he even lowered the shoulder a couple times. So definitely something to monitor, but nothing to freak out. And shout out to Brandon, who is hitting us up in the chat right now, who has Christian McCaffrey, and he was lucky enough to get Jordan Mason. He was sniped 1 pick before me by a friend of the show, Tyler Kempe, in our League of Records. So, Kempe, I hope you're happy that you have Jordan Mason and you screwed me over. But it is what it is. Week 1, welcome to fantasy football. It's definitely going to hurt me because of the new waiver wire system in our League of Record as well, which I will not let live down. But let's go into week 2 waivers. We're kind of already talking about that. If you're listening to the show later than today and you weren't able to grab a Jordan Mason or one of those guys, or maybe one of those other guys pop off as the game progresses, obviously they go to a top target if there's some concern about Christian McCaffrey. But other than that, there's some other names. Do you want to go through this list, or
maybe take it by position group? I guess here.
Okay.
There's not as much at the wide receiver position this week as we were probably hoping for. Normally you have that 1 or 2 guys. The big few, Rashid Shaheed had a pretty big game for the Saints, and there was not a lot of Chris Olave. Brandon Cooks with 7 targets as that number 2 in Dallas. And then any of the Rams wide receivers that we might want to add in the absence of Puka Nacua. Anybody there you want to dive in on?
Yeah, I think the most interesting debate is the Rams wide receivers. Tyler Johnson, he had that 63-yard play. But Demarcus Robinson, we saw him step up in spots last year. He was okay. I don't think there's any that are, must go out and ads this week. If I had to say one, probably Demarcus might be a little consistent to start. Tyler Johnson could come along though. But they're not like huge fab spenders. If you play in the fab system, I don't think you're dropping more than a couple bucks. Maybe if you're in a higher spend league, 10 to 12 kind of range for one of those guys. And I would loop that same caliber of player right in with a Rashid Shaheed or a Brandon Cooks. Shaheed is very similar to me as like we talked about with the other fan question, Xavier Worthy. He's going to be the big play guy. Some weeks you're going to wish you have him because he gets that 60-yard bomb. And then some weeks he might get 2 or 3 catches for 5 yards because they tried a couple screens that go nowhere.
Exactly. There a lot of these guys in this area of wide receiver are very boom or bust, exactly what you're saying. So we haven't found that wide receiver, and there might not be that wide receiver this year that ends up being that Puka Nacua is going to be consistent every single week. But some of these guys are worth stashing. I think Brandon Cooks is definitely worth stashing, being as we had high expectations for him last year. Dallas's offense sputtered a little bit, but they're a team that likes to get up on people in the regular season. That doesn't necessarily bode well for the wide receivers, but if they're going to have a little bit more of a connection between Brandon Cooks and Dak Prescott, I think that he's going to have a better season than last year. He's worth putting on the bench. Maybe you play him in a pinch, but he might end up being the guy that just kind of you put in hope for 10 points on in a bye week. So if you're just kind of looking for guys, you don't have great bench wide receivers, he's a guy worth stashing just to see if this keeps up and somebody that could fill in if you need it later.
Yeah, and just so you know, the 49ers inactive have come out, and there's no other running backs on that. So it looks like it'll be a Jordan Mason, Patrick Taylor, Isaac Orendo backfield. Seems like Jordan Mason is going to be the guy that gets the bulk of the carries, but this is Kyle Shanahan. He is known for shaking it up. So would not be surprised.
He's also someone who's normally pretty stuck with his guys.
Yeah,
so.
and you did mention back when we were doing some drafts earlier in the offseason how you can kind of view Deebo Samuel as like the handcuff for McCaffrey. Because he'll get some work in the running backfield, so he might see a little bit of an uptick as well. But the good news is the 49ers have known this all week. They've been game planning for it, so it's not like he got hurt on the first play and came out and they have to change up. There's no game plan, so a lot will come out of this game moving forward. It just doesn't help for those people that were relying on him this week. And the Madden curse is officially back.
Yeah, I mean, Christian McCaffrey's missed time over the last few years, very little bits, and I don't think this is going to be a long-term sustained injury. But for it to happen week 1, we all think he's playing, and then all of a sudden out of nowhere, it's like, that's tough. So Madden curse, I'm with you, is back. Why don't we go back to waiver wire here, talk about some running backs. So top running backs in our waiver wire, we got J.K. Dobbins for the LA Chargers, Bucky Irving of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tank Bigsby, down there in Jacksonville. I want to start with J.K. Dobbins because, man, do I wish he can stay healthy. Like, if he can stay healthy, he's had all of the upside. I don't remember a game where he didn't necessarily play very well when he's not been banged up. But I think I saw a stat in the offseason that he gets injured every 25 times he touches the ball, which is an absolutely insane stat. He way outperformed Gus Edwards this week. Gus Edwards had 11 carries for 26 yards. J.K. Dobbins, 10 for 135 and a touchdown. Like, you would have to think for a run-heavy team, if you're having that success with J.K. Dobbins, he's going to stay in there. But I just hope he can actually stay on the field.
Yeah, you definitely hope so. And not to keep going back and forth between the game or not, but it was announced that Jordan Mason will be the starting running back. So again, take that with a grain of salt. It'd probably be a little bit more of a committee, but he would be the guy. And if you're listening right now and you have him and Jordan Mason is sitting on your waiver wires, go pick him up. But yeah, J.K. Dobbins had an incredible game. And he is probably going to be the most sought after waiver wire pickup this week. The injury concern is definitely there. I don't know how much fab I'm willing to spend on him. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But he also still saw less carries than Gus Edwards. And I'm not saying that can't shift and change, but knowing what I know, I don't know the man personally, but knowing what I know of Jim Harbaugh, that's the right one in the
Jim,
Chargers.
that Harbaugh.
He'll ride the hot hand. So like it
Mhm.
could be a Gus Edwards week next week. It could be a J.K. Dobbins week. That like I need to see a little bit more consistency. But if you want J.K., you're probably gonna have to pay up for him. How much are you willing to spend in Fab?
Knowing that he might be a starting running back, I think you got to spend a pretty high chunk. I'm normally somebody who plays the long game on Fab, so I would probably say max 25 to 30. Especially knowing that like he is, it has a chance to number one get hurt, number two be in that committee where it's back and forth between him and Gus Edwards. But he's not. I don't think he's quite the guy that you go out there and dump 3/4 of your Fab on like you normally do see in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. Um, I think I would spend, maybe $20 to $30 in Fab.
So we're
And
right about the same page.
just for a fun tip, at least I don't know how accurate it is for me, but whenever I do Fab, I always don't end on a 5 or a 0. So if I want to put $10 on someone, I go to 11 because it just seems like some people be like, "Oh, I'll spend $5 on that." If you throw a 6, you'll get them for one extra dollar. And at the end of the day, that's not that big of a difference. So that's become more common. People put out random numbers like 12 and 13, and when they really mean 10, just to try to get their guy. But that's a way you can be like, I want this guy, but I'm not super upset if someone outbids me something crazy for him.
So by Cody's terms, then put $32 on J.K. Dobbins.
For sure, $32 on J.K. Dobbins. But the biggest player of everyone in fantasy football, not of everyone, but high up there was Isaiah Likely, completely outshine Mark Andrews. He's only 13% owned in NFL.com leagues. He might be the high price free agent. They were on the field a lot together, so I do have some concerns that it could go back and forth to whose week it is, which week. I don't know if he's officially taken over as the role, but they did get a lot of time connecting last week. Isaiah Likely, what are your thoughts on him and how much are you spending?
Especially with him playing a premium position like tight end where you're not going to find a lot of people, I think he would be slightly higher than J.K. Dobbins for me. I still wouldn't go out there and spend 3/4 of my Fab on him because I think there is definitely going to be Mark Andrews weeks, but go out there, spend $40 on Isaiah Likely because I think there's good and bad sides to him and Andrews being on the field together a lot. Number one, you're going to see the back and forth. That's the downside. The upside is they were not afraid to line up either Isaiah Likely or Mark Andrews in the slot. They really are a 2-receiver team right now with, Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman. You can add in Nelson Aguilar in there, but I think he was even a little bit in the doghouse during that game when he missed a really key block on a 4th down. But that just shows you that there's targets out there to be had. And they really liked targeting Isaiah Likely, not only in the red zone, but in key 3rd downs. Like he really looks like he's grown a lot with Lamar Jackson this offseason.
Yeah, I like Isaiah Likely, and we talked about that too. Like Zay Flowers is definitely their number one wide receiver, but their tight ends are very up there if you're gonna argue who's their top targeted or top pass catcher as well. So I think he's the guy I'm gonna go after this week. I know in our league of record he has already been taken, but there's definitely some other leagues out there. I'm sure the Couch GMs World Cup, he'll be a sought after piece, and we'll update people on that maybe on our Thursday show on some Couch GMs World Cup updates and where people went and kind of talk about these things. And then as you're looking at waivers, the last thing you got to do is you got to look at those defenses. If you're a streaming defense, if you drafted the Jets, the 49ers, the Ravens, Cowboys, you're playing them pretty much each and every week, not even worrying about the matchup. But if you took a team like the Cincinnati Bengals, they were going to have a big game against the Patriots. When they didn't, they still got 5 points. You're going to look for another team this week because they play the Chiefs. And 2 teams to look out there is the Chargers as they take on the Carolina Panthers. And boy, did they look bad. And then the Commanders, despite having -3 in some scoring, maybe even more in other scoring this past week, they get to play the Giants, who looked almost as bad as the Panthers. So some teams that you could possibly get some high defensive points there. Any other teams that you want to take a look at, or do you have a preference over either of those two?
No, I think those are the top 2 right now. I don't know if there's even a preference over the 2. Like, I guess if I had to pick, I would pick the Commanders. I think traditionally they've been growing on defense a little bit. The Giants looked absolutely awful. The Panthers look bad too, but I don't have any faith in Daniel Jones anymore. And that ugly pick six from the 4-yard line, I think really convinced it for me that like I'm willing to play any defense, regardless of how good or bad they are against the New York Giants this year. If I could just pick a defense instead of picking a team defense to play, if I could pick a team to play against in fantasy, that would be a number one pick.
Yeah. I think the Panthers are right up there with you. But the fact that it's week 2 and Brian Daboll was asked at the podium today, is Daniel Jones still the starter? Goes to show
Took
how bad
1 week.
how bad he played. So yeah, if you want to take a flyer on the Commanders, I like that as well.
Were the Giants the loser of week 1? Going out there on Friday night and seeing Saquon Barkley score 3 touchdowns and Xavier McKinney get an interception and then getting absolutely obliterated by Sam Darnold?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I mean, it's them or the Panthers. Like, I know the Panthers technically had the number 1 pick last year, so they were already bad, but then to go out and get, give up over 40 points against the Saints, who not a lot of people besides George had high expectations for. So
you're welcome.
Hey,
I
man.
know it's 1 week and I'm just messing with you, but it looked pretty good for me. If you listen to the podcast right before you watch the week 1 Sunday slate and saw the Falcons not be able to get anything going on offense and the Saints put up 40, that made me feel a little good.
I'm sure it did. But before we get out of here, we started to talk about it a little bit with the Monday night game, or actually I should say, anything else you want to talk about week 1? Or do you want to kind of wrap that up and just talk about this Monday night game?
I'm sure there's plenty more things we can talk about, but I am cool with moving on to some of these now official actives and actives for Monday night.
For sure. My last comment on week 1 is, how do you not call a timeout to let Brandon Aubrey kick that 66-yarder field goal? Like, I know you don't want to ice your own kicker, but how do you let it be a delay of game?
How do you then line up for the 71, get all of our hopes up, and then not kick it?
Yeah.
Man, just let him have it. He probably would have missed by 20 yards at that point. Like, I don't even care. I just want to see it try.
I don't think 20 yards. I think that would at least got to the end zone.
I'm not even saying 20 yards deep. I think he probably could have kicked it through the end zone. I just think when you're trying to kick it that hard, if he would have got it down the middle, I'd have been impressed. He probably would have pulled it one way or the other, just trying to get it that far.
Gotcha. I see what you're saying there. But yeah, that was one takeaway. We had to talk about it. And someone who doesn't typically like kickers for fantasy, at least I did have 21-point Brandon Aubrey this week. So I did appreciate that. Monday Night Football, not Packers. Former quarterback of the Packers, Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets. Speaking of Aaron Rodgers, not a sponsor by Netflix, but dropping a documentary on December 17th. So Aaron Rodgers, the Enigma, I think is what it's called. Trailer looks pretty interesting. But anyways, we're talking football. Here we went over some of the big news, which is Christian McCaffrey. I accidentally clicked away, so I do not have my inactives pulled up. So
49ers inactives. I can go through the whole list if you want me to, but I think the big ones, third quarterback Joshua Dobbs inactive, Christian McCaffrey, also Talanoa Hufanga, one of their key leaders on defense, is also inactive in week 1. 49ers, not quite at full strength, but for the most part on defense. Offense, Christian McCaffrey is a big loss, but they have a lot of other weapons. Jets side of the ball, nothing really important. No names that I recognize, at least a couple of backup offensive linemen. So Jets are pretty much at full strength, especially now having Aaron Rodgers for hopefully more than 4 plays this season.
Hopefully. Definitely looking forward to seeing how the Jets turn out, especially since their season does not impact Packers draft picks this year. Maybe I'm a little Jets fan this year, hoping not unless they play the Packers. Hopefully they can pull this out, help out the Packers on the NFC side. But so what are you looking forward to most about this game? Or if you want to answer it this way, what do you need in fantasy? I know you talked about it with the Christian McCaffrey, but is there anything else you need this game? Like, I know I need Garrett Wilson to not outscore George Kittle in one league this week, which doesn't sound very likely, but anything like that, I think that's always a fun thing. And if people are still listening, they can drop what they need in the chat as well, or hit us up in the comments if you got it when you're listening to this tomorrow.
I mean, if Chuck Clark can get 2 or 3 pick sixes, that'd be pretty cool. I'd win a dynasty league, but I don't think that's going to happen.
First was the IDP Was not
The
expecting
first
that.
one was IDP. I had to keep you on your toes. No, that's one where I'm facing Christian McCaffrey. I had no chance. I still probably have no chance, but 21 points out of a defender is not going to happen. Like I said earlier, I do need 3.5 points out of now Jordan Mason instead of Christian McCaffrey. I'm hoping that can happen, hearing that he is the starter, especially because that's a point per first down league. That is a very high scoring league. And then, like I said, my Couch GMs World Cup matchup, Jordan Mason needs to outscore Breece Hall by 5. Bit of an uphill battle on that one.
For sure. I need what do I need? I need Braylon Allen and Deebo Samuel to outscore the Jets defense by 13. So it was Christian McCaffrey, but now I have to sub in Braylon Allen. So not as confident as I was before we started live streaming. And I think that's the big one. There's some couple other small ones there. But you have a question, and this might be hard to answer now too, and it's only week 1. But can the 49ers make it back to the Super Bowl? And I think this is going to be an interesting test without Christian McCaffrey. Like, if they still look full and, a really high-powered team, and they can do something against this Jets vaunted defense, like, I think, and knowing they're going to get Christian McCaffrey back at some point, that would make them a real good bet to make the Super Bowl. And they got their guys back. They got Ayuk back. Some interesting stuff came out about that over the weekend, how it was basically like, look, today's the day. You're either traded or you sign the deal. And he ended up saying, I'm going to sign the deal. They got Trent Williams back, so a lot of fun. What are your thoughts? 49ers back to the Super Bowl?
I think they're not going to make it back to the Super Bowl, but I do think they're going to be a top-end competitor still in the NFC. And I think that's less of a testament to how the 49ers taking a step back and more a testament to the NFC being difficult on the top end. This is honestly probably the most well-coached team in the NFL besides maybe the Kansas City Chiefs. Because if you're telling me that Brock Purdy can go out there and look like Patrick Mahomes with, a lot of weapons around him. Let's be honest, like Mahomes has less weapons than Purdy does, but the fact that Kyle Shanahan has done this with more quarterbacks than I can count on one hand at this point, and has had offense look good at every single one. Their defense just keeps churning out stars and is one of the strongest in the NFL. They're always going to be a contender. The only reason I think they wouldn't make it back to the Super Bowl is because of who they'd have to face in the gauntlet at the end of the playoffs. Not that they don't have the talent to do it.
I think that's fair. If you're going to ask me 49ers the field, I'm obviously going to take the field. But
because you're looking at teams like Detroit, Green Bay, Philly, potentially Dallas. There's others in there I'm missing too.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing to watch out for, and you kind of hint on it. Rodgers being back, hopefully he lasts longer than 4 plays this year, going up against his favorite team as a kid, like all the storylines, team he couldn't beat in the playoffs when he was in Green Bay, kicking off the season should be a lot of fun. And as we're recording this, we are about an hour from kickoff. So just kind of getting you guys know and getting used to this new live format. Is there anything else about this game? Week 1, anything? Are we going to get wrapped up? Go throw some food on the grill, because you can still grill even at night for Monday Night Football. Crack open a cold one. Anything else you got?
Sit back, try to return the clock back to 2018. Rodgers in his prime, going for some MVPs. I'm worried there's going to be a little bit of a slow start because, this man missed. When you look at the fact he only played 4 snaps last year, you can say he hasn't played in almost 2 calendar years in significant time. That, this is going to be a little bit of a growing pain, I think, for Aaron Rodgers. But, man, he's been around for so long that I think he's going to put up a fight in San Francisco here tonight. And it's going to be nice to see how he can bring a young core of talent up to face one of the top teams in the NFL. And, man, there's a chance that this is a rematch in February. But I don't think it's super likely, but there's a possibility. And I'm interested to see how it plays out week 1.
Yeah, and I honestly think this is a great game to wrap up the week 1 slate. I thought we had an incredible week 1. Definitely looking forward to week 2 as we move on. Just a reminder that the Couch GMs Podcast is now live Mondays and Thursdays. We're going to go for about 45 minutes to an hour talking about what happened, the games, and the podcast form is not going anywhere. This same show will be in your feeds tomorrow morning. Friday morning. A lot of great content. Make sure you're following us at Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, X, TikTok, all those good places. Hit subscribe on YouTube if you're asking questions. Come ask us questions next week or on Thursday when we're doing this again live. I'm Cody Roadcap. That's George Kurth. And we will talk to you all in a couple days.